Hello, in this video I'd like to talk about the 5 possible position attributes available to you when working with CSS. Okay, so to get started, we're going to have a test scene. In this test scene, I'm going to have 2 sections. Each section is going to be 100% of the width and height in the screen, and they're going to have 5 equal boxes centered within the middle. To do this, I'm going to have 2 wrappers, which are going to kind of set the size to be 100% width and height. And then in those wrappers, we'll have flex containers. All right, so now let's look at the CSS. I'm going to start with a reset of margin 0, padding 0, box sizing of border box. And then we'll look at the wrapper. So this will set the width and height to 100% of the viewport. So we'll say height 100 VH. And so we can see what we're doing. We'll do border of 5 pixels solid green. There we go, 2 sections. Then we're going to center the items in there. So we'll do display of flex, justify of center, and align items of center. And then in our container, turn it from a column to a row. So container, once again, we'll do display, flex, like that. And then our items, just so we can kind of see what's happening here. We'll also make this container border of 2 pixel solid blue. Just nice to see everything that's happening here. And then our item, so we have an item class on all our items and then a numbered item on each of our individual ones. But on our overall item, we will set that to a width of 80 pixels, a height 80 pixels, a background color of pink, and a border of 2 pixels solid red. All right. Those were 2 sections. Okay, so in CSS Position, there's 5 options. Number 1 is static, which is the default. Then we have relative, absolute, fixed, and sticky, and we'll tackle them in this order. So if we go back over here, and now we're going to look at just item 1 dot item 1, and I say position static, nothing happens because that's the default, right? So then let's go to the next one. Position relative. Okay, so position relative is just like position static, but what it does is it unlocks other attributes. So you can do other things. So now that I've gone to relative, if I say top 10 pixels, now it's offsetting this element 10 pixels down from its original position. We can also do right. So now it's going top and right offset, or left. Now this might not work because the right and left are going to contradict each other. See, left, it doesn't make any sense. Oops, sorry, and I'll turn that on. See, the left is overriding the right, so this doesn't do anything anymore. We can also do bottom. And that's not going to do anything because of the top, but if I delete that, now the bottom's working. We can also do negatives. So if we do top again, negative, we can push it in that direction. Okay, so that's relative. Once again, static is the default. As soon as you go to relative, it lets you create these offsets within the container. Okay, so next up is position absolute. So let's do that. So watch what happens to this little 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 as soon as I do this. So position absolute. And what we noticed is the 2 has disappeared. So what is happening? What position absolute does by default is the item it's applied to ignores its siblings, and the siblings ignore that item. So if I do this, top of 0, we see that the 2 is still there, and now our 1 has gone to the top of the page. In relative, it would have been relative to its original position. In absolute, what happens is it's relative to the next defined HTML element. I know that sounds a little confusing, so let me show you what happens. So if I go to my container, and in my container, I say position relative, now the 1 is back relative to this container, because if we're looking at the HTML for a second, we have our item. First, it looks to the container. It doesn't see any position setting different than default. Then wrapper, nope. So then it goes all the way up to the body and then starts to position itself based on these offsets. Now with the offsets off, it's basically behaves as if there are no other siblings in that box, and the siblings behave as if there's no other items in that box. Okay, so then if I, let's turn this back on for a second. If I move this out of the way a little bit, 10 pixels, right, we see the 2 is still under there, and now it is relative to this container. Another thing that we can talk about now that we have 2 items on top of each other is a thing called the Z index. So if I want, let's move this over a little more. If I want my item 2 to be on top of item 1, what I could do is I could set my Z index to -1. So by default, it's 0. If I want the 1 to be on top, which is going to be automatically, I can set it to 1. Okay, and that's position absolute. So if I, here, let's do it for one of the items in our other stack. Okay, so let's see, we'll do item 6. And if I change, so it's behaving exactly the same. If I change my next non-default element from the container, so if I take it away, now it's relative to the top of the page. But if I change it to the wrapper, then it's going to be relative to that element. Okay, so that's CSS position absolute. Okay, next up we have position fixed. So let's get rid of this. And this. Okay, so here we go. Position fixed. So when I scroll, you can kind of see what's happening, right? So position fixed takes, the position it's getting and then basically stays in that spot no matter what. And here, as I scroll, we see it's going under some things. If we want it to be on top of everything, we can use the Z index again. So Z index of 1, and now my 1 is on top of everything. Also with position fixed, if I say top of 0, now it goes to the top of the page like before. But what's a little different than relative is if I go bottom, it's bottom to the viewport. So if I change, if I change the height of my viewport, I'm sure I can do this. Yeah, like that. See, it's relative to the viewport when we do that, no matter what we do. So that is position fixed. And then last but not least, we have position sticky. Okay, so by default, nothing is happening. It's behaving exactly as if we had position static. So to kind of understand what's happening, we need to make a few changes to this here. So I'm going to change my container. I'm going to give it a height of 500 pixels. Okay. And still nothing happens. But now, if I say top 0, what'll happen is as it hits the top of the page, it will stick to that spot when it's within that container. So watch, when I hit the bottom of the container, it's going to move out of the way again. See? So it's sticky when it hits that position. And once again, if I go to my container and I do this, it's sticky to the top of the page relative to the container. So then there's nowhere for it to go. And so it just kind of, okay, so we don't necessarily need to have it align right to the top. So let me kind of build a little scenario here that shows you what we can do with this sort of thing. So I'm going to get rid of that. I'm going to make another div in here. Like so. Then I'm going to say item 1, align self to start, flex, flex start. There we go. So now it's not filling the whole container anymore. So now let me turn position sticky back on. And top 0. So now it's going to hit the page and start counting through the numbers. And we can make our text a little bigger. So we'll say font size of 90 pixels and font family of sans serif. So now it's going to count like this. And if we want it to count from the middle of the page, this is going to be a bit of a hack, but I'll just make my container really tall. And then I will set my start to be half the viewport, so 50 VH. So now it'll hit the middle and start counting through, right? Now it is actually the middle because that's where the top of this box is, but if we want it visually in the middle, we'll do a little calculation. To do that, we do calc 50 VH, and then we will subtract half the height of our letter. So now it's more towards the center. And then just to make this a little more interesting, we'll make this 20, 20, 21, 22, 23. We'll get rid of this stuff. We'll get rid of this. And now we have this counter. That's pretty neat. To resist the urge to noodle with this. And, one more thing. So we'll say letter spacing of -0.05 rem. There we go. Okay, so that's CSS Position.